We're live. What's up, friends? Happy New Year. Happy 2025. If nobody's told you yet, I want to be the first one. And I don't want it to just be a happy new year. I want it to be a fruitful new year. And we actually had planned something else to share with you today, but because it's January 1st, I actually want to get ahead of some of the issues that you're going to encounter in 2025. And one of the first big kind of traditional, according to science, adversities that you're going to hit is going to be January 10th. And according to science, it's so statistically accurate that they have created a national holiday called Quitter's Day.
Well, it's not national yet, but
It's
like
not national.
unofficial.
Oh, it's unofficial.
Yeah.
That's right. They're probably not going to sanction a Quitter's Day. Not something we're real proud of, but dude, we're all for like pick your gender day.
That's so true.
But we don't want to make people that quit feel bad about themselves.
No.
We won't have a day to acknowledge that. So that's a true story, though. If you Google it, Quitter's Day, National Quitter's Day is January 10th. And what science actually says is within 2 weeks of New Year's resolutions being declared, that 79% of people have already evacuated their pursuit of whatever it is that New Year's resolution is. And so I don't want to just share with you like, hey, how are ways that I can make it past Quitter's Day? I actually want to have a larger conversation with you about what does it look like if you stopped living life 1 year at a time?
Yeah.
What if we stretch that vision out a little bit? And what if that vision was large enough that you would wake up and you would have such a level of urgency because of the size of the vision of your goal? And yes, we believe in God, we believe in miracles, but I do believe in order for miracles to take place, you have to do your part. I mean, just think about like Moses. Moses got to the point where he was like leading the evacuation, and he came to the point, was it the Jordan River? He comes up to the river, and he's looking behind him. I was like, there's nothing but adversity and enemies behind me. And God said, I'm gonna part this water. But it wasn't like God just parted the water and then Moses walked in and took all of the Israelites to safety. No, he actually had to step into the water. And what does that mean for you?
Yeah.
Like, what step of faith do you need to make? But also, I don't really want to talk to you as much about stepping in faith, because this is more of a leadership conversation. What do you need to do yourself? Right? I don't want to talk to you about the possibility of God. I actually want to talk to you about your own discipline, right? And that's really what this comes down to is, can we do what we say we're going to do? And I think for men, that's probably one of the things that Frank and I probably experience the most when we talk to these men and we talk about the struggles in their business leadership or their struggle in their leadership in their marriage. And I don't want to say 9 times out of 10 because I'd be making that statistic up. But a lot of times we hear that their marriage isn't going well because they don't keep their word to their wife. Oh, I'll be home and sometimes it's big things like faithfulness, but other times it's like, hey, I'll be home at 5 and I'll be off of my phone. And like little by little, when those small things don't get met, all of a sudden we've lost a large amount of trust a little bit at a time. Now I want you to think about how that is with yourself. Do you keep your word to yourself? Because that's really what a New Year's resolution is. It's not about anybody else. And remember, I'm not talking to you about New Year's resolutions. I want to impart into you 4 keys that will help you to stop just setting goals, and it will give you what you need to begin to achieve them. And I'm going to use some analogies and some stories from my professional career. And the reason that I'm going to share some of those stories is Frank and I were having a conversation. Then Frank, I'll cue you up to share a little bit. But one of the things Frank and I were talking about, is hey, what could we share on January 1st that would help people advance this year, and maybe some areas where they keep getting stuck. And we were having a conversation with, I think it was Brady, you, and Pastor Cameron, and we were talking about how to navigate the valleys. And Frank said, I don't know, how did it go? Like, how did you ask me? And we were talking
Oh,
about
yeah,
mastering the valleys.
Yeah, it's because we were talking about how a lot of people go from mountaintop to mountaintop. Like that's what they're always looking for.
So set some context for the people, like what we were talking about before the idea for what I'm about to share came to be.
Yeah, so Steve has just observed that, like in the Christian world and also in just the secular like business world, right? You see people always going for the mountaintop moments and like, man, if I could just
we were talking about ayahuasca.
Yes,
That's what
ayahuasca, and how people that do ayahuasca normally they get their quote unquote breakthrough, they go back to normal life, then they got to go back for another breakthrough to go to ayahuasca. And so whenever he was talking about how, man, there's so many people that they just go from mountaintop to mountaintop, that's what they're living for. I look over at Steve and I was like, would you define that the opposite of that is like being a pro? And he was like, absolutely, it's about mastering the valleys. And that's when we were like, that's what we need to cover today.
Yeah, so Frank came up with the idea, let's share something from your experiences about mastering the valley and helping people to go pro in the valley. Because if you can go pro in the valley, of course you can handle the mountaintop experiences. Everybody loves those, but how do you handle those low moments? And honestly, that's why most people, like, let's use New Year's resolutions for an example, or goals in general. Let's talk 90-day business goals or New Year's resolutions. They're both the same thing. You gave your word to something and you didn't do it. So if you've listen up, if you've set goals and you haven't achieved them before, or you set New Year's resolutions and you've bailed on them, I want you to listen up. That should qualify all of us, myself included, right? Like I'm so guilty of January rolling around and being like, this year's going to be different. And you watch YouTube videos and you map things out, and then February rolls around and like you're not doing any of it because you set too many resolutions. And then I learned, okay, like don't set so many, set simple ones and just stay really consistent on it. But what I want to speak to you about isn't how do you just achieve the goal, is how do you train yourself in a way that it just becomes second nature to decide that you're going to do something and then just to get it done. That's what I want to become. And I believe in some different facets and seasons of my life, I've been him. And I want to teach you how to be him as well. And so I think I should probably just get right into it.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So I've got 4 keys for you. I'm going to talk to my second camera. We've only got one nerd running the show today, but I think he's going to do a great job.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is. Thank you, nerd. This is a good view. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the 4 keys that if you implement this, you will stop just setting goals and you will begin to achieve them. And the people that are near to you, the people that watch your life are going to think that something drastically has changed in you. But really, all you did was focus on these 4 keys. The first one that I want to share for you is urgency. Like, remember, I'm sharing 4 keys with you on how to go from being a goal setter to a goal achiever, but it's really disguised as how do you master the valleys? Because we're all going to have mountaintop moments. And I believe that having urgency, and I'm going to teach you how to get urgency, but I want to explain to you the 4 steps and then I'm going to come back to them. Number 1, you need urgency. Number 2, details matter. So if you're writing notes, write these notes down. Number 2, details matter. Number 3, never too high, never too low. Number 4, don't quit, don't compromise. So I want to go back to number 1. Number 1 is urgency. And one of the ways that I have been able to really weather the down moments of disappointment, because you might go back and look at my Wikipedia bio, or you might not have any idea who I am and you just stumbled upon this Instagram live or this YouTube live. But I played in the NFL for 10 years, and you would have to look really close at my Instagram or at my Wikipedia bio to know that I've actually been cut 5 different times. So I've had a team reject me and fire me and send me out into the pasture 5 different times, but it doesn't really say that in the Wikipedia page. And the reason that I say that is I might have been some man's trash, but to another coach, the next coach that hired me could have hired anybody on the planet. but I was his number one choice. And so if you've experienced disappointment, you've experienced rejection, you've experienced loneliness, depression, anxiety, those are the feelings. Remember, I said feelings. Those are the feelings that come when disappointment or adversity hits. And a disappointment and adversity is going to hit you this year. So how do you get urgency, and how does urgency help you to navigate that valley? Well, the first thing that you need to do in order to get urgency is to put your dream on a deadline. So I don't know what your dream is. No, remember, I'm not here to stretch your vision. I'm here to help you achieve the dreams that you have right now. And if you don't have a dream, if you don't have a big vision, I want you to spend some quiet time with God. And I pray and believe that maybe after this podcast episode, maybe you spend some quiet time with God, and maybe the Holy Spirit will either bring somebody into your world that will help expand your vision, or the Holy Spirit will give it to you right there. But you have to have a dream, and then you have to put it on a deadline. If you can do that in step one, put your dream on a deadline, that will give you the urgency that we need. So notice the first key is requiring you to do something. What do you need to do? You need to write down the dream, and you need to put it on the deadline. And what will that equate to? That will equate to an urgency that you didn't have before. Now, remember, we're trying to navigate the valleys, but we're also trying to achieve goals. So the number one thing that you need to do is decide what you want to do or become, and put it on a deadline. Yeah. And once that happens, you're going to wake up with a sense of urgency, because you're going to realize the time's ticking. Number two is details matter. And like, what does that mean? Well, I remember I used to say this thing to my dad whenever I would leave the house and go to the gym. And sometimes it might be for like my second or like my third workout of the day. And my dad would say, "Hey, where are you going?" And I would never tell him, I would never say the words, "I'm going to the gym." I would always tell my dad, we should call him and ask him this, "I'm putting pennies in the bank." And what that meant to me is there's going to come a day where these really small deposits of going to the gym, and not just like going to the gym, but going to the gym, and when I'm at the gym, making that workout matter, right? Like making every single rep, having a goal for every single rep. And what that ended up doing as I put pennies in the bank is I had vision, right? Remember, we say put the dream on the deadline. I knew that when I started in the weight room hardcore at 14 years old, I knew it was going to be at least 10 years before I would be in the pros. Yeah. But my long-term goal of being a pro athlete, and at the time I didn't even know it was football, I just know that I wanted to be a pro. And I knew in order for me to be a pro, my body was going to need to change. I had athleticism, but I didn't have power, strength, and size. So I knew that if I dedicated myself every single day, no days off, and I definitely trained too much, but I would rather, because I didn't know what I didn't know. But going back on it, I didn't ever want to look back on those opportunities and say, I wish I would have trained harder. I want to look back on it and be like, man, maybe I trained a little bit too hard. But I didn't have mentorship. I was looking at muscle magazines to try to figure out what carbs and proteins and macronutrients and hypertrophy training is. So step number 2, details matter. And like, why does that matter? It's because there's a compound effect, right? There is a compounding effect that happens when you just do something small, just a little bit at a time. And I forget exactly what it is, but there's a statistic that if you read for just 20 minutes per day, within 1 year, you'll have already read more books than 99% of the society.
Wow.
Is that crazy that you can be a 1% master of literature by just dedicating 20 minutes a day for 1 year? So I want you to understand like what's possible, big vision, right? But I also want you to understand like what's required in order for the big vision to come to pass. I have a billionaire friend that in 2023, I was able to lead him to the Lord. And it's a crazy, crazy God story. And I say those things to say he's taught me a lot about finances. And in all of the different philosophies of investment and diversification, the number one thing that I've learned from him was actually a leadership thought. And he said, the reason that I am where I am, Steve, is like everybody looks at this $800 million apartment portfolio that I have. Everybody sees these yachts, these cars. They see the flats, the glitz and the glam. But what they didn't see is 20 years ago. 20 years ago is when I had this vision to live the life that I'm living right now. But the thing that they don't realize is all I had to do was master the boring stuff. And he has this quote that he says, the reason I am where I am is because I mastered the mundane. So write that down. That's a key for number 2. Like how you're asking yourself, okay, Steve, if the number 2 key is details matter, well, how do I make the details matter? You master the mundane. Right? Like the boring part of like getting up and spending 10 minutes in the Word. The boring part of getting up and maybe part of your routine is taking a cold shower. I don't know what it is for you, but nothing sophisticated about these simple routines that lead to long-term success. So that's one thing that I've learned from a billionaire, to master the mundane. And I applied that into my philosophy for building wealth, but also for building relationships. Think about it. Like my greatest relationships aren't the relationships that I've had in mountaintop experience with. My best relationships are the ones that constantly check in on me and are there over the test of time, not the bliss of an experience. Number 3, never too high, never too low. And if you're just joining us, I'm sharing with you the 4 things that you can do that will stop you from being like everybody else. Everybody else is a goal setter. But how do you become a 1%er? You become a goal achiever? I'm sharing 4 steps that you can do. And these 4 steps are also the 4 steps that you can use to navigate the valleys of life and to keep going. Number 3, I shared with you, never too high, never too low. What does that mean? Well, when I think back to my pro career, I was very, very thankful that the first 3 years that I was in the NFL, I had a kicker that I was a punter in the NFL, and I had a kicker that my rookie year, he was in his 18th season as a professional athlete. And his name's John Carney. He's been so impactful and influential in my life. I actually named my daughter after him in his honor. And he really took me under his wing and taught me what it meant to be a pro, but not just as an athlete. He taught me what it meant to be a pro as a husband, as a father, as an entrepreneur. And now pretty soon he's going to teach me what it looks like to be a grandfather, because he's still deeply entrenched in my family's life. And so one thing that he taught me, because he had navigated a lot of NFL seasons, and he saw me, he's like, dude, this guy's like full of energy. He's full of passion. When he's excited, he's really, really excited. And when he gets upset, he gets really upset. And I don't know if there's men out there that can like relate to that, to relate to the highs and the lows of maybe being an entrepreneur, or the highs and the lows of being a father or a husband. And one of the things that he shared with me that helped me to navigate the valleys of being a professional athlete and to come out of them, and one thing I want to share with you that will help you to be a better pro in the valleys, is never get too high, because you're always going to get more credit than what you deserve, but also never get too low, because you're also, conversely, you don't deserve as much of the blame of what it is that you're experiencing. And I believe that when you go through those mountaintop moments, that lifetime mantra of never too high, never too low will keep you grounded, and it will keep you humble. And because I'm telling you what, from a champion, I remember being on a parade float, going through New York City. It's called the Ticker Tape Parade. 2.1 million people flooded the streets of New York City so the world champion New York Giants could be honored. There were so many people. We should pop up some videos if I was thinking of it. There were so many people that you couldn't see the streets. And as we went down, you would look up at all the apartment windows and all the skyscrapers, and they all had their windows open, like waving red, white, and blue things, either because they loved America or somebody in their hometown brought home the championship trophy. Never too high, never too low. Because this is a true story also. The very first home game that we had that following season, we played the Dallas Cowboys, was our first home opener. And we played poorly, and we were the reigning world champions, and our fans, real talk, our fans booed us. We had just won the world championship 5 months beforehand, but because the performance that they were seeing on the field did not match what they are used to seeing, they booed us. Never too high, never too low. So you can say that for like a year, but you can say that for a lifetime, right? Like never get too high on yourself and never get too low on yourself. And that's one of the ways in a season of life or in life in general that you will be able to navigate the lows of where you're at. And you'll also be able to navigate the highs and the goodness of God. Number four is don't quit, don't negotiate. And when you put your dream on a deadline, one of the things that's going to give you that sense of urgency is you're going to take away your ability at the beginning to negotiate that goal or to quit that goal. And I want to marry that with a Bible verse. This is my son. I have a son that's 17 years old. He's my best buddy. And he's got a Bible verse that he would say is his lifetime verse. And I love this verse as well. It's Galatians 6:9. And in that verse, it says, "Do not grow weary in doing good. For in due season, you will reap if you don't give up." And the key of that verse is don't give up. Because I don't know, as you hear my voice right now, and maybe you are right in the middle of a goal pursuit. Maybe you didn't wait for January 1st. But I want to speak to you, and I also want to speak to the people that are about to start their goal pursuit. You need to take away the permission you give yourself to quit. Like if you make it non-negotiable, you're going to finish the race. I've gotten a chance to crew for one of my friends that runs like 100 and 200 mile endurance races. He's freaking crazy. His name is Pierce. And I got to pace him for the last 13 miles of like a really grueling race called the Leadville 100, where he runs through the mountain. And when I came upon him, he was at mile marker 87 and his knee was swollen. And he was like, "Can you tape my knee and give me some Tylenol? And like, hopefully we can get this going so I can finish the race." So I wrapped his knee up and I gave him some Tylenol and gave him some food. And then we got back on the trail and he took like 1 or 2 steps and he like collapsed and he looked back at me. He was like, "What are we going to do?" It wasn't like, "Hey, it was a good run, but like, obviously you can see, Steve, this knee is twice the size of this knee. So like, I have permission to like shut it down."
Yeah.
No, he looked at me because he was looking for any option that I had that his body would be able to make it 13 more miles. So he took quitting off of the table. And so for you, in order for you to navigate the valleys of life, the mountaintops of life, or for you to go from being just a goal setter to a goal achiever, you need to pre-decide that I will not quit. And one of the ways that I solidify that kind of commitment, that I say that I'm not going to quit, is hearing a promise from God that if what I'm doing right now is a good thing, and if you're pursuing a goal that's not just about yourself, but it's about other people and it's about the glory of God, and it could be, I want to quit smoking, it could be I want to lose weight, it could be I want to save up $5,000 in the first quarter of this year, whatever your goal is, make sure it's a good goal. Make sure the process of you getting to that goal is a good way. And then you can rest assured that God will catch you. God will be faithful with his promise. Do not grow weary in doing good, for in due season you will reap if you don't give up. And so I'm going to sum all this up, and then I want to get Frank's opinion and thoughts on this. But step number 1 is get urgency. How do you get urgency? You put your dream on a deadline. Step number 2, realize that details matter and everything that you do compounds. So you have to master the mundane. Step number 3, never get too high and never get too low. Keep your eyes fixed on the prize. And step number 4, don't quit and don't negotiate. Galatians 6:9 says, "Do not grow weary in doing good, for in due season you will reap if you don't give up." So I'm praying that the Holy Spirit speaks to you, and I'm praying that what you have received would be seed that finds righteous soil, because what I just shared with you that's leadership. Like at the end of the day, that's what separates the pretenders from the contenders, is the people that can be disciplined, because God has blessed and anointed every single one of us with time, talents, and treasures. And what we do with it, AKA the discipline with which we steward that, we will be judged. And I don't know about you, but I want to stand before my Abba Father, and I want him to look down at me, and I want him to say, well done, good and faithful servant. He's not going to say to you, hey, really great job, entrepreneur, public speaker, coach, and mentor. No, he's going to want to know if you were good and a faithful servant of him and no one else. Frank, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are the only thing that keeps coming to mind this entire time is my best friend Guy Jones, who just did the 100-mile race.
He took it off the table, didn't he?
Yeah, and I didn't finish. And what I keep thinking about, and maybe you can expand on this a little bit, I think it'd be so valuable for everyone that's listening right now. But last year, I felt like I had a lot more urgency to finish because it meant something for me, for my family. This year, full transparency, all I really cared about was helping Guy Jones finish.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I was like, dude, I'm seeing this stuff happen in my family, like all these different things. I'm like, I didn't have this huge, like, if I finish this race, it's going to do this in my household, type of deal. Like,
and your commitment prep, like, showcased that.
Correct.
So I knew that you didn't have that much invested into it because I pretty much do life with you every day.
Yeah.
But for Guy Jones, I knew that finishing would mean a lot to him.
Yeah. Exactly. So maybe on the urgency, because what I've noticed is there is other
That's not
areas.
me scapegoating you from next year and finishing. Hey, in 2025, it's about you.
But like something that I've noticed, right, is like there's so many other areas in my life where like I won't give up.
Yeah.
And I'm relentless. So would you say that falls under urgency? And if somebody is recognizing, like, for example, right now where I'm recognizing that in 2025, Frank Ortega is going to do 100 miles, right? Then it's like, what advice would you give to someone to create urgency so that when they're in the valley, they're like, no, I'm not stopping.
Don't pick a dream or a deadline that you can't do without. Like, I think Tony Robbins says there's people that want it and people that have to have it. Don't pick something that's really big that you don't have to have.
That's so good.
And I feel like one of the ways that I'm able to, like, create tension on myself and not pressure is knowing that the things that I'm pursuing, I've got to have them. I've got to have salvations when I show up.
So you gotta have like an obsession.
I gotta have them. Like, I it's already like too clear to me that God has anointed me to do this. So when I show up, I have to have it. Other things I have to have. I have to have something that outlives me, like my children. Like, I have to have it. I have to have my kids choose Jesus, and like not just choose them like, oh, they give their life to him. I have to have them serve God. I have to have a marriage that wins. Like, it can't just be a marriage that's good enough. I have to have it. Now, if I have to have a marriage, that's a great godly example to my kids, going on 50 dates is no problem.
Yeah.
Going on 50 dates is no problem. Being patient with my wife is no problem. Being like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not because you're realizing, like, this has to happen. My kids have to see this. They have to experience this. I have to save souls. If it's a have to, and it's not a desire or a want to, that right there, it makes it real. Like, if I close my eyes and I just imagine myself in the throne room, what are the things that you have to have? And I feel like that's what gives me like an urgency or a burn that most people don't experience in other people. Like, you don't meet that many people that are like on fire, on purpose, on brand. And I have bad days. More consistently than me, because
I would agree.
My goal like so supersedes 10 years. And it's a goal, call it a goal. It's a goal and it's a vision that I have to have. I have to have it. It's not a hobby. It's not this would be nice. I have to have it. And part of me training my body the way that I do is because I know that I'm going to bring more people to Jesus if I showcase excellence. Like one of the greatest things that you can put on as an evangelist is excellence and joy.
Mm-hmm.
Excellence is going to attract people. And when you speak, they're going to automatically give you a level of like consideration just because of like what you've done or who you are. So if I know that people are going to be more open-minded to hear about what's really going to change their life, Jesus Christ, then it makes total sense to take what it is that God gave me and make it excellent.
Yeah.
Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, do it as though you're doing it for the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
That takes on a whole new meaning when you're talking about the throne room.
Yeah.
So
let me ask you this, Bishop. How often and intentionally do you think about the things that you just said? Like, I have
every day
and see them
every day, multiple times a day. And I'll say that I had to train myself that way because at first, like when I first like encountered God or decided I'm going to go all in, honestly, like a lot of my life was like reprogramming myself.
Yeah.
You know, like I took secular music completely out of my life for an entire year. And all I did was listen to worship music because I knew that my brain wasn't functioning the way that God designed it to. And it's because I had put so much like porn and pollution into it.
Yeah.
So, okay, if you got to detox your brain, Steve, would you be willing to give God everything for 1 year and just see what it looks like on the other side of it? That's discipline. But I had seen pictures of men live lives that I desired, and I said, well, God, that's a whole lot more about like not their habits, and it's a whole lot more about like you change them and then everything else that they do, like it almost seems like you're on everything that they do.
Yeah.
And I wanted that and I desired that. And I believed that a way that I could put myself at least in the best position that my mind would begin to think like God's will only put holy things in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess another challenge to people would be is like, man, if you want to reprogram your brain, science says it takes 67 days. So what would it look like if you just committed to the next 67 days of like, you know what, I'm going to be really consistent in what I need to do. And we challenge our men. We give them 4 habits that every one of our men in our community has to do. And they're super simple things. They're simple, but they're hard to do, you know, like choose a diet, and they get to choose whatever diet that they choose, but choose a diet and stick to it. Work out every single day, and they get to choose what kind of workout it is, and read their Bible and pray. Those are 4 really simple habits, but how difficult do we find it to do consistently? Because our life just gets filled up with a lot of distractions and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all, and I do too, I fight the idol of comfort.
Yeah.
I'm constantly looking with every like success or next level of finances that I go to. My wife is, she's worse than I am. But I find myself wanting to do things for her, and it's comfort. It's all comfort. You know, at first it's like, hey, can I go to Paris? And now it's like, hey, I want to go to Paris, but like, you know, next year, could I do first class? And I'm like, goodness, you know what I mean? Like I want to do in Paris. But I'm the same way, though.
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly looking for ways to make my life easier and more comfortable. And if we're not careful, that could be an idol.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers.
No, that's really good, because here's what I'm hearing you say is that like you need urgency, the details matter, and you got to master the mundane. But I feel like that right there is where January 10th comes in.
Yeah.
Mastering the mundane is where the quitting happens.
Yeah, because it's not about 10 days later. Guess what?
Mm-hmm.
You're not excited anymore.
Exactly. But you are.
Yeah.
Because like even when you were sharing, and I know maybe everyone that's watching right now, you might not have been able to tell in detail, but I'm sitting right next to him. And like as you were sharing with your eyes closed, you're getting teary-eyed, because I would imagine that you were seeing the marriage the way that like you see God showing it to you. You were seeing your kids growing up the way that you see them growing
up, and also thinking about
God.
The desperation of how important it is. That's why I think visualization is really important, and I feel like it's something that I've gotten really good at.
Yeah.
But initially I didn't really get good at it because I was pursuing God. But I really learned, I think there's a difference between meditating and praying. When I'm meditating, I feel like I'm trying to empty my mind and only see one thing. When I'm praying, I feel like it's much more active for me. Meditation is, to me, it's just visualization.
Yeah.
It's picturing myself, and I learned how to do it really good as a professional athlete, because as a punter or a kicker, they're very similar to like a pitcher, like an MLB pitcher. Like an MLB pitcher might play like once per week, maybe once every 10 games, and also that's performing, but how often does he practice actual pitching?
Yeah.
Maybe every day. And if he does do it every day, he's on a pitch count.
Correct.
Right? Like, okay, today, like, don't throw over 40. I want you to throw 15 at about 80%. I want you to throw about 10 at 75%. And then I want you to finish off with about 5 pitches at 90%. Like, they have a game plan like that. And so for a punter, conversely, I'm the same way, right? So I had a certain pitch count. Remind me what direction I was going on. What were we talking about?
I was talking about you always
visualization.
Yes.
Yeah, we're talking about visualization. So a lot of the work that pitchers do and kickers and punters would do is visualization work, right? They would spend time going through scenarios in their mind of different games. Like the really high level MLB pitchers will tell you, if I'm not playing in a game, I'm in the dugout visualizing what I would do if I was on the mound right now.
Wow.
Because that's practice. You're actually improving as you're visualizing. And I think it's the same thing for like pursuing God. Like when it says meditate on the things of God.
Yes.
When I meditate or I visualize, now I visualize myself like before I would go out and speak, like every single person that hears my voice raising their hand and giving their life to Jesus.
In that faith.
It's a mixture of faith and meditating on like what you want to see. So it's a mixture of like leadership, which we're capable of, and then the promises of God that are supernatural, and then finding a way to put them together.
Yeah. That I feel is what would get people through the valley. It's really understanding this is not something I want, I need it. Because it's like an obsession at that point. And then putting it in front of you often, because that's what I'm hearing you really say is like, well, it wasn't just a goal that I wanted, it's something that I have to have.
You said I need to have it. I don't even say need. I have to have it.
Yeah.
Because I think there's needs, and then there's like, I need to have it and I have to have it. I feel like there's a difference.
Yeah.
There's want it, you need it, have to have it. Have to have it is like, I'll cut my arm off.
Yeah.
Like Ronnie Lott was an athlete back when I was a kid, and he was a legendary defensive back, and he broke his finger and he was going to have surgery, and like, oh, you're going to be out for the rest of the season. He's like, well, what's the alternative? And he's like, well, the alternative is like, we wrap it up and you go out there and play, and you're going to have to get your finger amputated. And he's like, cut it off. They cut off half of his pinky, and he went out there and freaking played.
Let's go.
He didn't need to play.
He
didn't want to play. He had to be in the game.
Wow.
He could not imagine his life not in the game. So I will do whatever it takes. If you need to amputate something, get it done and send me back
That's
up.
good, Bishop.
And I think that's the difference between people that set goals and people that achieve goals. It's a difference between people that go through valleys and quit, and other people that go through valleys and encourage everybody else to keep going, because they've already decided, I'm not even going to waste brain space on how do I get out of this. I'm going to go through it regardless. So let's grit it. Let's go. I've got a sense of urgency. I've got a clarity of focus, and I've already pre-decided I'm going to pay my price, whatever it is. And I think that's how you navigate the valleys and how you go from setting goals to achieving them.
Hey, yeah, I agree.
So I still have a lot to learn, but I do believe in this area of life that I have some mastery and I want to grow in it. But these are the things that I have learned that have allowed me to say, hey, I'm 108 pounds as a freshman in high school. I want to get jacked. And I walked across the stage at 225 pounds, right? So I set that goal. And not only did I like change my circumstances, I changed my weakness to a strength. And then I also chose, I want to get a scholarship. Then you earn a scholarship. Well, I want to go to the pros. Well, then you go to the pros. Well, I get to the pros. I want to be the fittest man in the NFL. You become the fittest man in the NFL. Well, I want to become a Super Bowl champion. You become a Super Bowl champion. Well, I would become the most philanthropic man in the NFL. You become the most philanthropic man in the NFL. And then you start to turn around and look and think to yourself, my life's not all about achieving and results. And I thought it was. And I'm surrounded by results and trophies and accolades. And my life is empty. One of my friends was just telling me about how a guy that had over $100 million just killed himself. That's because he's taken his time, his talents, and his treasures in building his own world and not building God's world. And when I had my radical encounter with God, that's when I realized my life and my extremely high, like weird skill sets that I have of like kicking a football, but also being able to visualize, God's taken that and God's repurposed that onto his plans. And now as I delight myself in the Lord, he's given me the desires of my heart and some of the desires of my heart that I didn't even know that I wanted. So now my clarity of focus is, man, like now the things that I have to have are really the things that are most important to God anyway. So now like the desires of his heart and the desires of my heart have collided. And guess what? He's getting and I'm getting exactly what it is that I want. And when I don't, I'm still rejoicing in my suffering because I know that it's coming.
Amen.
So I think that's it for us today.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, friends. Well, if you want more of this, we're going to, in 2025, our commitment to you is doing a whole lot more of this, is like coming on with an unpolished thought, but coming in desiring to serve you and to have this to be conversational. And once the nerds get a little bit better at working the technology back there, we're going to have on a whole lot more guests. But Nerd, you've done a lot better today.
Amen.
And I think more than likely, if we can get through the hump day of Quitters Day, we might even start calling you by your first name. All right. I love you guys. I hope this and pray that this is encouraging to you. And we'll probably see you back here probably tomorrow. God bless.